Hey everyone, welcome to Payments After Dark. Today I have Jeremy Layton on the show from Verisave. Welcome, Jeremy. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So today we're talking about something that I get a lot of questions about, have a lot of conversations about. Seems like there's a lot of confusion about what's going on, especially with agents that focus on B2B merchant services. And that's, level two and three data, CDP. Um, and Jeremy is in a very unique position to address this, and I'm happy to have him on so we can kind of dive in and clarify what we can and see how, you're solving it in your business and how we can help, agents and ISOs do it themselves too.
Yeah,
Uh,
happy to talk about all these details. Yeah, that's definitely a confusing thing right now.
it is. Let's start at the beginning. A little bit of your background, how you got into payments, how did you start Verisave? Um,
Yeah, absolutely. So we started our company back in 2001, and we were an accounts payable auditing firm. And we would go into businesses, we'd identify areas within their business that they were overpaying for services, for products, or they were double paying invoices, they were missing out on discounts when they had earned them. And it was a really successful business. And while we were in, doing these reviews and these audits, there was a line item expense that nobody within the companies we were working with could explain to us. And it was that of merchant services fees, right? None of the companies knew what it was. All they would say to us is, we don't know. That's just the cost we have to pay when we want to accept a credit card payment. So we dug into it a little bit and realized, wow, this really is confusing. And this was probably back in 2008 when we started, going down this road. Well, fast forward, 2015 or so, we said, all right, we're ditching the accounts payable audit solution, and we're focusing just on merchant services, cost savings, and that's all we've been doing for the last 10 years or so.
because you were in the whole book, right? All of
Mhm.
the accounting, and this was the biggest pain point that you found.
Yeah, because nobody understood it, right? And that confusion is what led us to say, all right, let's see if we can go learn about this. And so, from '08 to 2015, that 7 years, I think we became really, really knowledgeable, really sophisticated, and we realized, all right, we just got to focus on this because there's so much confusion in this space.
Yeah, and you're taking an interesting angle because you're not an ISO, you're not a processor, you're a consulting firm. You come in and you help merchants reduce their processing costs. So, I know you came at it from this accounts payable angle, but what helps you? What motivated you to stay that way instead of trying to switch them like most people do to a different processor? You stuck with this consulting model. What made that so successful for you?
A lot of the companies early on shared with us the pain of needing to switch. Well, we don't want to switch to a new processor. And to be honest with you, early on, that was kind of the angle is because we just thought that's the best way to do it. Let's just go get a new processor. And
Mhm.
I think we learned real early on that's not the best angle to take with this because there's things you can do within an existing merchant account that'll generate the exact same results, right? So we plus we realized that a lot of these companies we were working with, they get phone calls, emails, outreach all the time.
Yeah.
And if they thought we were a processor or were interested in switching them to a different processor, kind of lumped us into the same bucket,
Mhm.
and they wouldn't listen to us. And I'm sure a lot of the ISOs and agents listening to this today they can probably relate to that, right? They get kind of boxed into a corner a little bit of I know you're calling, you can save me money, yada yada yada, right? But I don't want to switch. So we just learned over time our messaging needs to be different, and it's just way easier to keep, the processing with their existing process whenever possible. I'll put a caveat in there because sometimes a switch might be the only way to get, the proper interchange rates, or maybe there's limitations in different things, or maybe the processor themselves is just unwilling to cooperate. But like our goal is to keep them with their existing processor, and it seems to have worked out really well for us.
Yeah, and I mean, I've said this to you before, but I think it's brilliant because not only do you differentiate yourselves away from this kind of salesy pitch that you're coming in for, but also you're automatically targeting larger businesses because the small guy doing $20,000 in sales a month isn't going to get enough savings to need someone like you. So you're automatically leveling up the market that you're going after. So you're bringing in these big merchants that you can actually help with significant savings.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's
and
got to be
everyone's trying
large
to do
enough.
that, right? And
Yes.
you're just like, this is the model that gets them.
Yeah, it's got to be big enough of a savings to make an impact.
Yeah.
$100 savings here or there, that doesn't really seem to move the needle for the merchants we're talking to, at least the larger ones. And then it's got to be worth it to us as well. If we save a company $100 a month, we're not going to be able to make enough to keep the lights on. So yeah,
Right.
that the larger merchants are definitely where we have the most success for sure.
Yeah, and it's interesting there too, because I think it ties in really nicely with the topic of our discussion today. So as you're, diving into processing and getting really informed on what can save merchants money there, and you're working with this larger class of merchants, you stumble upon B2B a lot. And so you mentioned optimizing interchange rates. So let's get into that. What do you see there? I mean, what was it that kind of sparked this is the direction that we need to go in and this is going to be really good for us.
When you look at a merchant statement, or you look at all the fees that a merchant pays, over the course of a month, 85% of that in most cases is interchange.
Hmm.
So if you're talking about where's the biggest bang for the buck, let's focus in on that. I mean, again, early on, it might have been, let's just go negotiate better rates with the processor. And
Yeah, that's the logical route, right? Yeah.
yeah, start out, and you might shave off a few basis points here or there. But when it comes to optimizing interchange, you're talking level 2, level 3 processing. Not only is that where a majority of the fees are paid by a merchant, but you can make a significant impact on those interchange fees when you optimize with level 2, level 3. You're talking, historically somewhere around, 70 basis points, 100 basis points,
Wow. Yeah.
130 or 40 basis points. That adds up to be a lot larger number on both sides there. So that's where we realize, okay, let's really focus in on the interchange. And the process, once in a while we'll come across a merchant account where maybe a merchant's getting ripped off, or I mean, I could tell you some stories, which I won't on this call today here, but there's definitely scenarios where it's the processor is not treating them fairly, and we'll address it, those. But if it's in line or reasonable,
Mhm.
let's not even worry. Let's just focus in on where the biggest opportunity is, and like I said, that usually falls on interchange.
Yeah, and most agents don't know to look for this, right? Because it can be fairly complex. But how many merchants that you talk to actually know that they can do interchange optimization?
It's funny because as we talk about it, half of the time maybe they've heard of it, all right, in passing, or they Googled something, or used chat to kind of learn a little bit about it.
Mhm.
But half the time they've maybe heard of it. Maybe 10% of the time they actually know what it is, but most of the time they really have no clue what it is. and it's been around forever, right? It's not like this is a brand new thing. We're talking probably 20 years or more that
Hmm.
level two, level three processing has been around. And how do most of these merchants not, how are they not aware of it? And so it's still a really valuable thing to talk about and to bring up. If I had any advice for any, ISO or agent listening to this, and that ought to be one of your big talking points is, hey, we'll take a look at your interchange and see if we can help you out there. But again, because that's where most of the fees end up anyway, man,
Hmm.
if you can solve problems there, and it doesn't take any money out of your margins, right? If you can, and maybe you can even get away with charging a little bit of a higher discount rate from time to time if you are optimizing their interchange. But yeah, it's still an unknown thing. And what Visa's done with their CEDP, they've only made it more confusing. So it's been
Yeah,
a
and that's
big
what I want to
challenge.
want to get into now is okay, this is available and it's huge savings to a merchant. And I think it's an important point that you brought up too, that it can also be a margin multiplier for agents. You can still save them a bunch of money and earn extra basis points on the deal. It's a win-win for both. But we know, and a lot of agents out there know and have questions about, level two's going away. So let's talk about that. For someone who doesn't know what CEDP is, what its, level two is being replaced with, how would you present that? What's happening right now?
Yeah, so let me give a little bit of a explanation with this. So CEDP, commercial enhanced data program, right? It's all about making sure that the data that you provide with a transaction is actual real data. For so many years, you could get away with using a gateway like PayTrace, just to throw out an example, where they would autofill the transaction with fake data, and it would still satisfy the level two, level three requirements, and the merchant would receive a lower interchange rate on those, qualified transactions. Well, the commercial enhanced data program, the CEDP, says, all right, we're done allowing fake data to be used to qualify for lower rates. Now, one caveat here is this is for Visa, right? Only right now. MasterCard still says, hey, send us your fake data. We'll take it. Right? We don't really care. I have heard that MasterCard is not too far behind with coming out with something similar. So for those of us, that think maybe this was just going to be a Visa thing, it's likely going to be across the board, right? Visa, MasterCard. So, but the providing that extra data is what qualifies those transactions for lower interchange rates. And they only apply to certain types of cards. Not every credit card is eligible for a level two or a level three rate. They're business cards and purchasing cards and corporate cards. That's where this is relevant too. So if a merchant isn't processing any of those, this is kind of an irrelevant, item that they would be, talking to a merchant about. But if they're B2B, this is like the biggest thing that should be talked about with every merchant out there. So that's the kind of the history of the CEDPs. Visa's like, no more fake data. And I'll tell you one other thing, Mike, is it's interesting here is this wasn't just like Visa said, all right, it's time to make a change. Let's clean it up. I'll tell you what happened. And you can kind of quote me on this, but I don't have any exact quote, that I'm going to be sharing with you. But all the card issuing banks, the banks that issue credit cards to their customers, they are the ones that receive a majority of the interchange fees, right? So when a merchant processes or accepts a credit card payment, that 80%, 85% of that fee that ends up going back to the card issuing bank, and they
Mhm.
collect that as revenue. Well, when you process a level two or level three transaction, that interchange comes down. So what does that mean? That means the banks are getting a lower revenue. So they started to catch wind of this. They're like, our revenues are taking a hit because of fake data.
Yeah.
So they started complaining and chirping at Visa and said, this is not okay. This isn't okay by us. Our revenues are being reduced and they're not even following the rules of providing data. Anyway, it's a whole big thing. Visa's like, all right, stop complaining. We'll make some changes. So that's in a simplified version. That's basically what's happened with CEDP.
Yeah, and it's kind of two-pronged there, right, with the issuers and with Visa. On the one hand, and correct me if I'm wrong here, they created this program so that B2B merchants who typically wouldn't use credit cards to have invoices paid, right? Use ACH or some cheaper form of transaction would use it. And
Yeah,
I think that's a good selling point is that you don't have to pay 3% interchange if you do this correctly. You can actually make it really reasonable and convince merchants that only take ACH to start using credit cards because it's cheaper if they know about it. But the
yeah,
second thing is, yes, it's cheaper. Maybe they get, more merchants using cards, but they want to monetize the data. It's important. Data is king right now. So
sure.
if they're not able to do that, if all the data is fake, they're kind of losing on both ends here, right?
Yeah, no, that's a fair way to look at it. All that data that's provided when you process a level two or level three transaction, it's supposed to end up somewhere, and either the merchant can have it and utilize it and do some things with it. The banks themselves, I'm sure, use it. And if all that data is fake, it just undermines the integrity of the whole program, right? And so at the end of the day, it's what good is any of that data when it's all fake?
It's not telling any stories. It's just fake,
Yeah,
And okay, so we know that merchants can benefit from this. We know that it's getting harder to do. So tell us about what you do at VeraSave. I know you've come up with a solution for this.
yeah.
Um, what do you do now? How do you help these merchants make sure they're capturing those lower rates?
Yeah, so it's become really difficult for a merchant to provide the real data. I mean, a merchant used to rely on the gateway. They even relied on their processor to autofill,
Right.
right? The fake data. I mean, even today, Elevon still is autofilling with fake data, and they're getting away with it somehow. What they're doing is they're randomizing the data so it looks real.
Hmm.
Well, you don't think Visa's going to catch on to that? I mean, I'm guarantee they will.
Yeah.
But those, it's one of those things that if you're going to provide real data, that's tough to do when you used to rely solely on your gateway or your processor to do it for you. And so what we've figured out is okay, when with CEDP, if you're not doing it correctly, Visa is notifying the acquirer with what areas you're doing it wrong.
Mm.
Error codes. They're providing error codes that say, hey, this merchant isn't a verified merchant today because they're doing this, or this incorrectly. And so what we do is we happen to know all these error codes. So if we go to the processor or the acquirer and we can request those error codes, we'll know exactly what's wrong with the data that they're being sent. That's one thing. That's the first thing. What's causing the problem?
Hmm.
Well, what do you do at that point? Well, you then got to go in and fix it, but how do you know how to fix it? Well, there's two ways. There's two different areas that we've noticed that merchants are struggling. So if you have a merchant today that initiates a payment, call it inside their ERP,
Hmm.
right? Their accounting system, whatever. That's all that CEDP data, it's sitting there in the ERP. That's where all the real data exists.
Hmm.
And so when you initiate a payment in the ERP, it's really easy to append that data to the transaction for processing. The problem is some of that data isn't populated. Some of that data maybe isn't formatted correctly, so that even though it's attaching that data, there's something wrong with it. That's where the error codes can really come into play and say, hey, this is what's wrong with this data here. That this field is left blank. right? You can't leave this field blank or whatever the error codes are. So we're able to, in this example, act as a consultant, advisor, and just help the merchant in this example to make sure the data they're providing is the real, accurate, formatted, correct data. That's number one. The second thing that we help merchants with is if they initiate a transaction in a gateway. The payment comes in, they manually key in the data, the card information. Well, historically, Paytrace would autofill all the fake data and off, for processing and go. Well, now that doesn't work, or at least it's not going to work for long, right?
Right.
So how do you append real data to a transaction that initiates in the gateway? Well, one, you can manually key it in, and that'll take forever on every transaction. There's human error that'll occur. That's just not a realistic solution. Well, we know that all that data resides in the ERP. So
Mm-hmm.
how do we get all that data from the ERP and attach it to a transaction that initiates in a payment gateway? Well, we've got a piece of technology that basically acts as a bridge between the ERP and the gateway. This tech will integrate with a merchant's existing gateway. So when that transaction comes into the gateway, it takes that and goes back to the ERP and says, okay, here's the transaction I'm dealing with. I need all the invoice level data, all the transaction data, and it pulls it forward and appends it to the transaction in the gateway and sends it off for processing. So it acts as a bridge, if you will, between the ERP and the gateway, and it will qualify for the correct level 3, CEDP rates. Now, again, if you could somehow magically get all that data over into the gateway, this would be an easy thing. But the challenge is that's just not feasible in most cases. So this acts as a nice solution for these merchants.
Well, that's pretty incredible. So the your solution sits within the transaction flow. So every time a transaction is initiated in that gateway, in real time, you are searching for the relevant fields based on this customer within the ERP and pulling it in before that transaction is then sent,
Yep,
right?
that's exactly right. So the tech integrates with the existing gateway, right? So there's no need to swap out gateways or plug in a new gateway. That's kind of a unique thing all by itself, right? Then using an API call, it goes back and we're able to connect with the ERP. And we have a couple of tech people on our side that work with the tech people on the merchant side to make sure that data is all configured the right way, make sure it's available. So when that API call comes using webhooks and things, that data is there and it can grab it and pull it forward. The challenge is knowing, well, what transaction is this actually referring to? So when that invoice or when that payment comes into the gateway, there's got to be something, right, that it's connecting to. It's an invoice number, a PO number, or something, so that when it does go back, it knows right what to look for. But yeah, it's a pretty slick tool, and it's amazing what technology can do these days, where in the past you used to not be able to do that.
Yeah, and I think it's, something I want to ask you because the bane of all agents who work B2B deals and mid to enterprise level deals is integration, ERP integration. It's closed off, it's difficult. We all lose deals because of this.
Yeah.
Um, how do you get into them? I mean, has that been an issue with you? Because you do need that data. Are you integrated
Yeah.
into 100 different ERPs? How does that work?
Yeah. So that's an interesting dilemma for sure. So there's a couple ways you can look at it, right? If there is an integration that exists already, then this tech solution probably wouldn't be the solution. If there's an integration already, that there's already a bridge that exists between the ERP and the gateway. That's where the consulting aspect of this can become really relevant. Now, you might say, well, can't anybody consult and help the merchant. Yeah, absolutely. The challenge is with CEDP, all these error codes, understanding what those error codes are and how to solve for them, that becomes really, really difficult. So from an integration perspective, anyone could probably, like, if they were expert enough in CEDP, solve for this or no. The challenge is you've got to have a smart tech person. And let's be honest, I think most of us probably aren't that, right? So
Hmm.
you've got to bring someone who can communicate with the merchant's tech person and make sure that all that's going to work the way that it needs to work and make the appropriate changes. So from an integration perspective, that tech tool isn't necessarily, what would be the solution for this. However, to again answer your question now, well, how many ERPs do we have an integration into as far as our tech solution? The nice thing is it's not as though we're going in and we're building an integration into the ERP, because that's really difficult. It's really
Yeah.
time consuming. It's really expensive to, I mean, there's innumerable, ERPs. You could spend your entire career just building in these integrations and probably not even get halfway there. So
And
what
some
we
people
do
do,
is we
right?
we work with the merchants, IT team, and we identify the fields, and through a webhook, we pull that data forward so that when that API call comes, it's able to grab it and pull it forward. So to say that it's integrated with the ERP is a little bit misleading. It's kind of correct in this example I'm giving you, but the key is to pull that data forward and make it available so that when the API call comes, it can grab it and pull it forward. Kind of a confusing explanation there, but that's in essence what's happening.
No, but it's a really creative solution, I think, because it allows you to go into anyone and say, yes, we can do this for you, regardless of what system you're using. And I think that's the important point, is that it's kind of universally available because of the way you're doing it.
Yep.
Uh,
And I'll say, can I say one other thing too that's interesting about all this is if you're talking to like an enterprise company, chances are their tech team is really sophisticated,
mhm.
right? They're really smart. The smaller size of company you get, they while they're still all really smart people, they're not as sophisticated. So as you get into the SMB, mid-market companies, there's a good chance that their tech team might not be quite as sophisticated as what an enterprise. And so you need to make sure you have a sophisticated, tech team of your own to be able to make that work so that all this API calling and webhook to make sure that's all going to work correctly. Because the smaller you get as a company that you're or merchant that you're working with, the more they're going to rely on you to solve their tech problem.
Right, right. And that's where VeriSave can come in and help them along that path, right?
Exactly right. We'll help them build it all out so that it will work exactly the way that it needs to work.
Hmm. And and it also presents an opportunity too, because again, this integration roadblock is always there. I talk to agents and ISOs about this all the time. But if you do convince a merchant, say, to use your invoicing platform that lies outside of their ERP system, now you can go in and say, okay, but you can still get qualify for these lower interchange transactions with VeriSave because you could be that bridge. And I think that's really powerful because at the end of the day, that's what they want. They want a more efficient system that costs less than whatever their integrated solution is.
That's exactly
Um,
right. Yep.
and it brings us into, our next discussion. A lot of people think that consultants come in and steal their business, and that's really not the case with what VeriSave's doing. You're actually working with a lot of agents and ISOs now. You want to tell us about how does that work? Why are you not the enemy to
I agree with you. We do get perceived by ISOs and agents that we're the enemy. And maybe, like I said early on in our whole journey, that might have been more accurate. But today, our focus is interchange, right? We want to help optimize interchange. That's where the biggest opportunity for savings, the biggest opportunity for an ROI on things for us is all that. So our focus is we want to make sure that the merchant is processing the lowest interchange fees possible. And as we began to partner with ISOs and agents, and they've caught wind of this, okay, they're only focused, their primary focus is interchange. Let's see what Verisafe can do for my merchants. And sure enough, as we've built this trust, and we're really focused heavily on I want these ISOs and agents to look at Verisafe and say, oh, okay, they're like a great partner, right? We can partner with them and they'll help us. We actually believe that there's three ways that we can help an ISO or agent. One, we feel really strongly about this tech solution that we've talked about, that it will help a merchant's an ISO agent's merchants interchange fees, that we can help them lower those fees. That will help an ISO or an agent retain that account.
Yeah.
Right. The minute that the fees, that a merchant's fees go up, their radars, are like, okay, where do I go? What do I do? Do I need to go find a new processor? Do I need to switch Like, that's like their immediate reaction. And this solution will help those. We believe anyway that it is helping. It'll help those merchants stay loyal to their existing processors. Second way that we think it'll help ISOs and agents close more deals, right? If they're talking to a merchant today, and there's a CDP angle, there's a level 2, level 3 issue, they might not have a solution today for CDP. Well, in comes Verisafe. We can actually help that ISO or that agent land that deal because of our solution. The third angle that we think we can help ISOs and agents is when they have a closed, lost account. Let's say, as you mentioned earlier, there's a software integration, and that merchant can't switch to the ISO or the agent for processing. That happens, as you said, all the time, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Right? They're just locked in. Well, we would call that a closed, lost opportunity for the ISO or agent. Well, that's not a closed, lost opportunity for Verisafe.
Right.
If that ISO or the agent can send over to Verisafe their closed, lost opportunities, we'll still go in and work with that merchant, even in their existing environment, and we'll generate some savings in a few different areas that we think will make a really big impact. And we're so confident about what we're doing with this that as we partner with these ISOs and agents, we're willing to pay these ISOs and agents some big time referral money, right? We're calling it big time bonus money. So if an ISO or an agent, in any of the three examples I kind of gave you there, send us a lead, and that lead turns out to be a qualified lead, whether it was a closed lost, whether it's an existing client or a prospect that we can help, if it's one of those and we can help them with their CEDP, we'll pay $1,000 to that agent right up front for that referral as soon as they introduce us, so we can have a conversation with that merchant. And if that savings is at least $2,000 a month, right, that qualifies them for an immediate $1,000 payment. Well, let's say the savings climbs to like $10,000 or $15,000. Their $1,000 can turn into like $2,500. Right up front,
that's huge.
It's big money, right? And then let's say a week or two later, we end up signing that merchant as a client, as a Verisafe client. We'll pay that ISO or agent another $1,000 or $2,500. So we're willing to put a whole bunch of money up front of this for leads that come into us from these ISOs and agents that are qualified leads, and especially if we close them as a Verisafe client. And then the third, we'll do a rev share of 20% back to the agent or ISO of all the revenue we collect during the course of our relationship with that particular merchant. Our contracts normally last 2 to 3 years, where we're sharing in the savings with a merchant, and we'll give 20% of that back to the agent. So if you look at that closed loss deal that we're going to get nothing out of it, well, here's a way you can get some upfront money twice, and you can still get some rev share along the way. So we think it's a pretty good deal. It's been interesting as we've really launched this program in the last few months. we're getting a lot of traction from ISOs and agents. Hey, we want to participate in this program, and it's been really cool to see the response we've been getting.
I'm not surprised. You can make just as much through you as getting switching their processing. I mean, that
Yeah,
it's an incredible bonus structure. And I think it's important to highlight too, because we talked before, I know how your model works. It's it's a very low risk referral because you're not charging them anything up front. You only make money if they save money, and you make, a percentage of their savings. So if you can't help them, no big deal, right?
yeah,
Nothing
it's
happens
exactly.
there.
Yeah,
And
there's no risk whatsoever.
yeah, and I also love how timely this is because you mentioned retention, which I think is huge right now. And I've talked to a ton of people about this. Hey, when my merchants lose level two, I'm going to be getting a bunch of phone calls about, what happened. My rate just skyrocketed. What do I do? And the second that that happens, especially if you're not on top of it, emailing everybody saying, "Hey, this is happening," explaining it. If they don't hear from you and that rate goes up, the first thing they do is look for another processor because they think, man, he just jacked my rates. They don't know what's going on. They don't know that
Yeah.
the whole system just changed on the back end.
Yeah,
This
you're
is
exactly correct. Like you're at risk of losing that account for something you didn't even contribute to doing, right? Or a
right.
problem that was caused. It's all bigger picture. Now you could, one by one explain this, and you might have to explain it to your merchant, and whether they'll believe you or not, hopefully they do. But like if you have a solution that will solve that merchant's fee increases, man, you might be the hero.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you definitely would. I mean, I think it's win-win out there. And then, on the second point too is, close more deals. If you're offering them a rate that just looks impossible because you're able to lower interchange, you beat out all the competition immediately. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I I love it. I love it.
Yeah, it's
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 really
been
cool
it's
what
been
you're
it's
doing,
been it's
Jeremy.
been a real cool thing, Mike. And we learned over the years that ISOs and agents and Verisave can actually get along. We don't have to be at odds at all. And one thing we will commit to is any deal that comes in the door that's an existing account or a prospect that you're trying to close, we won't even touch or even discuss the discount rates and margins. If a merchant asks us, "Hey, is my processor, being honest and treating me fairly?" Our response will be, yeah. Like that's not our area of expertise or whatever we'll say, but we commit to everyone listening to this that we will not touch your profits because you worked hard to get all that, right? And let us focus in on where the savings that won't have an impact on your margins. And again, that's interchange.
Right. That's a good point. There's a lot of savings to be had outside that margin. Um, so for people who are interested, how do they get a hold of you, Jeremy? How do they get a call with Verisave and see what you're about?
Yeah, the best way to do this is go to our website and you'll see at the top of our website, verisave.com,
Hmm.
there's a partnerships tab at the
Okay.
top. Click on that part of that tab. It'll take you just to a quick little form and you can fill it out and submit it. And we'll have one of our reps get in touch with you as quickly as possible. That's probably the best way. If you did want to call me directly, I'd actually be open to that too. You can call. I'll give you my phone number right now. You can write down, but it's 801-643-5969. Call me directly or
Brave man.
email me direct, jlayton@verisave.com. Best way is probably to go through the site and get kind of set up that way, but happy to have a conversation with anybody that wants to talk.
Thank you, Jeremy. This has been enlightening. I've learned a lot. And I'm sure, we've addressed a lot of things that are causing anxiety with agents and ISOs right now. Appreciate it, Jeremy. Thanks again, man. It
You
was great
bet.
talking to you. I hope we can continue this discussion.
Yeah, happy to chat further as new developments come about for sure.
Yeah, and good luck with everything.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks.